Next up, we have Dale Smith, who's the Creative Director at Bridge Training and Events. Thank you, Dale.
So that audience participation, what are they?
Thinking.
What are they?
Feeling.
What are they?
Doing.
Okay, there you go. Thank you, Helen. That was a great presentation and a great act to follow. So my name is Dale Smith, and as Elizabeth mentioned, I am Creative Director for Bridge. We're an employee engagement consultancy based in London. And as an organization, I just like to explain our logo for a minute, because I want us to get in the mindset of what is a brand, because it isn't just a logo. If I was to dissect this logo and create a story around it, how many colors are in this logo? 4?
5.
It's actually a 3-color logo. However, that's part of our story when we look at employee engagement, because it's actually a 3-color logo. It's red, yellow, and this turquoise color. But when you combine two things together, you create something new. So the logo itself, when I look at the red or the yellow, it actually says us as an organization and the energy that we emanate. The red, as it swoops outward, is our creativity, and the blue is our process, and that's our strategic positioning. And I'm not here to sell Bridge. It's about how do we think about brands. Do we just think about it as a logo, and that's something that we can project outwardly? Or what sits behind that logo? Because what sits behind this logo is our people. And inside of that sits our values. Who here works for a brand? Show of hands. I know it's after lunch. You don't work for a brand? Who here is a brand? Show of hands. Because the answer should be yes to both of those. Because we all work for a brand. It doesn't have to be Nike, it doesn't have to be Apple, and it doesn't have to be Google. But when we get inside of what is the essence of a brand is a relationship. A brand is something we represent. And encompassed in that human factor, or what we call at Bridge the human element, is values. So these are the Bridge values, and I don't need to go through each one of them, but to me, that is what a presentation from Bridge should look like. That is what an employee should look like, and feel like, and think like. Because it's about how do we utilize values that sit inside the human being inside of us, and actually then articulate that outwardly as part of our promise. Because what we're doing at all times is balancing brand and culture in terms of our company culture, that is. And I know that when Helen talked about brand, and we look at data, but we have to look at that in the same way for our employees, because they're being asked to deliver on that brand promise every single day. And it's them who sit closest to the customer experience. Because when we look at how all of this interconnects, Bridge was established in 2005, and that was actually drawn on a napkin. Trying to figure this out many years ago, and looking at what we established as living brands. But first, a brand is virtual. That could be your website, it could be your brochure, it could be your customer promise, it could be any element that goes out into the world, but creates a promise. And that's how I'm going to engage with your organization based on that promise. And it's in that promise creates my expectation of you. I don't know if you've ever gone into a boutique store. Have you gone into a small boutique store? What kind of service do you expect in a boutique style brand? Personal. And you walk in and you get ignored. Brand disalignment happens in your brain. And if it's a clothing brand, and I did some research several years ago, and I just watched people when they got ignored. And they did what I call the clothes shuffle. They walked in and they looked at a few things on the rack, and they walked straight back out again. Almost disillusioned by what had just happened because it didn't reach that instant level of expectation. And that expectation wasn't only set by the brand, it was set by the industry that that brand set in. So when all this virtual stuff goes out, it should be encompassed in the promise. And it also should have a value, which is the personality of what that organization is going to be like. And then that sits within your customer. Now, your customer isn't just those who pay for you. It can be your employees that are considered your customer. In private medical, it's the doctors that you're trying to encourage to come work for your organization. It's the surgeons that you want to get through the door. Because if you're going to try to get to the top of the game, you're going to need to have top of the game employees. So customers don't just sit in those who pay. It's those who engage with us as an organization. So as we create this customer relationship, and that's based on the promise, and I would say we've all been employees of somebody at some point. Yes? Have you ever been let down as an employee? Delivered a promise that didn't live up to the expectation? Have you ever started that brand new job and you didn't even have a business card or a computer? Because as employees, we go in with that same promise that we're going to engage in an organization. And then that's how we create employee engagement, is looking at customer journey mapping, but through all aspects of our organization. Because if our customers are our people who pay, but they're also everybody who walks through our organization. And if it's an employee in an engagement perspective, it's from the induction to the interview, to the induction, all the way through the process that they travel through the business. And then that expectation of service sits over here, which is in your living brands. And that's what I call the human element. Because the virtual brand and the promise should always be met and delivered by the living entity that represents our businesses. So in this value spectrum, who here has values as a human? Anybody here have values? Now I'm going to get your hands to go up, please. There you go. I know it's after lunch. We got 2 hands over here, lots of values. Okay. Yeah, so we have values. Those are the things that you represent every day. I often joke as I get older that I became my mother. Because the things that she instilled in me as a kid and I often rejected are the things that I truly value today. But those are the things that drive all of our behaviors. Now, this is from one of our clients. We work with Cromwell Hospital in central London, and these are the Bupa values. But I just wanted to show you an array of what values could be when you're looking at an organization. Because if you were looking at a transformation program, you've got to take a moment in time, both in your brand and also in your company culture. And these are 3 questions that I start with most clients with. Where are you now? Keep it simple. And let's explore that. Where are you currently with either your industry, your job, your company, whatever you're looking at from a brand perspective, where are you currently now? And that's where customer journey mapping definitely comes in, because you're able to have that pinpoint. But then where do you want to be? Take your now state and put it into a future state. Because it's in that future state you're going to achieve success. But then you have to ask yourself, how am I going to get there? And that's when you create your action plan. Because when you're looking at employee engagement, it has to be action-based. But when I look at the now state, what are the current values that is guiding a particular organization that we're working with? Now, working in the private health care sector, there's some huge values that the people we work with represent every single day. But we have to ask ourselves that question. What are the values that's driving my organization today? Because not everybody is delivering customer experience excellence, but that comes from the individuals that's representing it. So I want everybody to just grab a pen. I want you to ask yourself a question, and you can take this away with you. As a human, you as an individual, a number one, what do you want in a relationship? Give yourself one word, and just jot that down. I don't see many pens going down. So ask yourself the question, because I ask employees this every single day. What do you want in a relationship? Because a brand is a relationship. A company culture is a relationship. A community is a relationship. So what do I want in a relationship? And then as an organizational citizen, so somebody now who is in the community of working with others, what do you want in that relationship? And we did this poll with several healthcare professionals that we were working with at the time, and these were the 4 top answers that came out. What people that work in healthcare really, truly value and need in the community in order to drive customer experience excellence. They needed to have trust, a high entity of trust in the community. Because that community, remember, is going to be the one that supports the customer experience. They needed to have high levels of compassion, in part because they deliver compassion, and compassion rated very high on their value system. Stability, because it is such a volatile and flexible market, that they needed to know that their leaders were working with them, and there was stability in the market or the community in which they were working. And interesting, they had a high desire for hope. And I think in looking at 4 values that drive healthcare and drive healthcare communities, it's how do we then work with those? Because this is a spectrum, and we're all trying to achieve that ultimate customer loyalty, where we deliver on that great customer experience, where people want to come back time and time again. Because if we're looking at data and we look at it in the singular, that's interesting, but I look at it in repeat. If I'm looking at it from an employee experience, it's how long do your employees stay there? What is the retention level? How do they represent the organization every day? Because that's a true sign of engagement. But we begin with this brand and the promise, and as you're going through a transformation journey, it's about how do you link those employees to that brand promise. And by doing that, it's creating a value system that is interconnected between the organization and the people that live there in the organization, the community. Because once we get that bit right, the culture, the company culture actually begins to become self-sustainable. It takes on a life of its own. But our role as leaders is to first engage the employees, not just to the jobs they do, not to the tasks they do every day. It's to the greater and higher purpose that they deliver every day. Because then you can begin to establish a sustainable customer experience. And once that has been established, then loyalty begins. Not only loyalty in terms of repeat, but also loyalty in people speaking as an advocate for you. So if you're looking at an employee engagement program, now this is something that we would spend a whole year on, but I wanted to just give you 5 touch points to walk away with. The first stage of employee engagement begins with asking. And we see this time and time again with all organizations we work with. The second we put out an employee survey or start running focus groups with employees and ask them, you start to see engagement scores increase. Because so often they're not asked their opinion, they're only asked to deliver. And then create an internal brand. Because a company culture or an organizational culture exists like any other brand. And so therefore it needs an internal brand in order for all of the transformation pieces to stick to. But lead from the front. I think it's key, and the number one thing that we keep seeing in all employee surveys, not just in the healthcare market, is leadership. That my leaders don't understand me. They don't walk the shop floor anymore. They're too busy in meetings. But if we're going to get true employee engagement, it has to be authentic, and it has to be done from amongst the community, and then map and audit that customer experience, because it's always going to be evolving, and it is led by your employees. And then create processes, strong processes that allows it to continue. This just happens to be one transformation program that we did for a year with a digital healthcare provider. But it shows the various touch points that we had to go through, from creating a value system to an internal brand to several interactive workshops, all the way through to get the employee journey on the go. As I mentioned with Cromwell, we've done work with Cromwell over the last year, and this was an example of the brand that we created for them. And that now exists in all employee areas, and it exists in all workshops for them. Because like any other brand, like Nike and any other brand, without a logo, what does all that stuff stick to? Where does the emotion emanate from? And so therefore, at a very simple Nike or a simple Apple logo, you'll feel a lot of energy and a lot of history. So my recommendation to all organizations is to create that internal brand. And you can't take customer service off the shelf. It has to be unique to your environment, unique to your organization, and very unique to your people. We rebranded a 5-star property in Florida a couple of years ago, from a Ritz-Carlton to a boutique hotel. And to see the service transformation was incredible, because they had very clear brand guidelines as a Ritz-Carlton, but a boutique hotel is all about experience and flexibility. So create new content for your people to engage with. So thinking about what engages people, not only as a population and an organization, but us as we grow as leaders and we grow as people. These are three key things I want you to focus on if you're going back to look at how do we engage our people? What do we need as humans to actually feel engaged? Autonomy. We have a human desire to be free. Now, in an organization, that doesn't mean just free will, do whatever you want, wear whatever you want, come in when you want. But in an organizational sense, autonomy is about having the ability to have my part in the process. And sometimes to fail, but to be challenged by that in order to strive for success. That sits in all of us, is our ability to be free and to be a participant in the organization. Not to be done to people, not to be told just what to do, but to be asked how we can do it. Mastery is our human desire to be better at stuff. Has anybody here ever learned, say, to play an instrument? What do you play? Classic guitar. Was that so you could be a famous classic guitarist?
It's just fun.
There you go. It was just for fun. Yeah. So your desire to try something new. Do you get excited when you get better at it? Sure. Yeah. And that's our human desire for mastery. It's about striving and being on a journey where we're getting better at stuff. And that's the thrill. It was never to be a famous guitarist, but you enjoy getting better at it. Because we need to set challenges for people in order to engage them. And often people are not engaged in the task, but they're engaged in the journey and the part that task plays. And the other is purpose. To be doing something greater than just myself. To be engaged in a higher purpose, and the work that I do changes lives. And I think that sits in all healthcare professionals. And it should sit in all organizations. Because we, as engaged employees, should not be just about the task. Because I know when I go in the office and I have 27 emails, and then I have to do this, and then I do that, it doesn't really engage me. I get it done. But when you can connect to that higher purpose, that all of us have the ability to make change, then that's when you see true engagement happening. And it's about how we share those stories, because when we looked at some customer journey mapping in a couple of healthcare institutions we were working in, I was very intrigued by how the employees saw it. They didn't see that journey. There were still a lot of silos. They didn't see that at reception you're handing over to the next side of the department. So taking from that to a ward nurse, or to a porter, or to the next stage of the customer journey. So if I was to say anything around customer journey mapping, also engage your employees in it. Let them see who they're handing over to. Because in all organizations, we create silos. But silos need to drop if we're going to have engaged employees and have an amazing customer experience. So in conclusion, if I was to give any quick tips, be innovative and ensure you have a very fresh approach. Because true engagement comes from people who are challenged and excited by the opportunity and not just done to or told people. And always remember that the brand and the culture are aligned, and they should always be two sides of the same coin. Because one is virtual, and one is the delivery of that virtual promise. Be inspiring and stand out as leaders. Because being well-led in an organization is what drives engagement. They look to leaders. All of us look to leaders. But employees look to leaders that stand beside them. And it's incredibly important to always know that engagement comes from respect. Respect in the organization and the brand, but also respect for the leadership team. And the one thing that I always encourage is share success stories. It's so important to go out amongst the people. Find the heroes, the artists, the storytellers, the sports enthusiasts, because it's in that entity that sits in their personal brand is the things that they connect to your customer experience. We're all just real people. And when we get into that authentic, real zone and understand that excuse me, that our entire our employee population sits real people, delivering real experiences to real patients and real customers, and share those success stories. Because I often work in organizations and I hear anecdotal success stories, and I then express that to somebody else in the organization who's never heard it. And I think it had been the most amazing customer experience I've ever heard. And it stayed within the silo. So true engagement comes from success, and true engagement comes from sharing those stories and also living that brand promise and those values. So that's me on time. So thank you very much.